All right, everybody, welcome back to the Waiver Wire. It's July 19th, 5:11 p.m. It's a beautiful day in Portland. I'm joined again with Nick. We're here. We're just discussing division still. We're moving on to the NFC North. Got an NFC North guy with me. Bears fan over here. So, what do you think about the division this year?
It's potentially the best division in football. I think that top to bottom, there is a lot of competition. You have four teams with legitimate quarterbacks in Trubisky, Rodgers is obviously a superstar, Kirk Cousins, and Matthew Stafford, who I think is really underrated. You have good coaches, the question mark in Green Bay with Fleur, but I think that you could really make an argument that this is the best division in football.
Yeah, man, we'll jump right into it with your Chicago Bears. They averaged 26.3 points a game last year. That was ninth in the league. Averaged 340 yards. That was 21st. 220 passing yards, 21st, and they were 11th in rush yards at 121. They also had 50 sacks, and their turnover ratio was plus 12, which is super impressive. Considering if you listened to us last week, my Pittsburgh Steelers were negative 11, and that plays a massive major factor in games. So, how'd you feel about the Bears' season last year?
Man, it was awesome. As a Bears fan, it's been a rough road. It's been a rough road ever since 2006 when Urlacher and Sexy Rexy took us to the Super Bowl where Peyton Manning tore our hearts out after Devin Hester had that just magical kickoff return to start the game. Everything seemed perfect. Since then, it's just been downhill. But ever since they hired Ryan Pace, who is the general manager, things have started to click. They hire Matt Nagy. He is an Andy Reid disciple. He's an offensive savant. And then they make the big trade. They make the big trade for Khalil Mack, and all of a sudden, they're the favorites.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean the Bears won the division last year. They went 12-4, easily won the NFC North. The Vikings were behind them at 8-7-1. So you brought up Khalil Mack, man. How'd you feel about that trade? What were your initial thoughts? Yeah, how were you feeling about that? I mean, that's a big deal.
Oh my gosh, it was like the greatest thing ever, honestly. The only thing in my sports life that's been better than Khalil Mack trade is when the San Francisco Giants won the World Series three times. And so it was awesome. The week before it was the Vegas odds. It was the Bears and Packers. So it was either going to be the greatest day of my life or the worst day of my life. And Ryan Pace, super aggressive general manager, got the thumbs up from the ownership and said, "We'll pay him when you trade for him." And he gave him the bag for it, and
That's so
he's
funny.
pay
It's
off.
so funny you brought that up because Bleacher Report just came out, just literally popped a notification in there that was like the Packers were aggressively pursuing Khalil Mack before the trade. But yeah, I thought it was a great pickup. I love defense. I love defensive ends, and it doesn't get much better than Khalil Mack. You guys were tied for second with sacks at 50, and you led the league with points allowed at 17.7. You also led the league with 27 interceptions, which is absurd. Uh, it's crazy. But anyways, man, so can Leonard Floyd become like a breakout player with Khalil Mack drawing some attention on the other side of him? What do you see this season for the Bears and for a player like Leonard Floyd?
Yes. So Leonard Floyd, anyone who might have known me around my freshman year of college, shout out Seth, Tyler, and Magoo, they experienced my reaction when the Bears drafted Leonard Floyd. And let's just say it was not my brightest moment as an individual. I was not a fan of Leonard Floyd, and not because I didn't think he was a good player. It was more the fact that it was the a top 10 pick. But rookie year, he had 7 sacks, and things are looking good. But ever since, he has went from 7 in his rookie year to 4.5, and then 4 last year. He finally played a full 16 games last year, which was encouraging. He did have more tackles for loss than he's ever had, and more passes defensed at the line of scrimmage than he's ever had. So that is a plus. He actually, for his frame, plays the run a lot better than you would stereotype a slender player like he is. But I have hope. Obviously, as a fan, you always have hope, but I really do not expect him to be this dynamic duo with Khalil Mack because Akeem Hicks is the dynamic duo. I think Leonard Floyd's a solid player, but I think that we're going to give him his 5th-year option, and so that will be the following season after this one. And I think that's it. I don't expect him to get an extension or a second contract, but I do think he's valuable to other teams, just not as the dude.
Right, yeah. And so, with that being said, let's take it to the other side of the line with Khalil Mack. He had 12 and a half sacks last season, which I think at some point, it might have been through like week 3, he had more than the entire Raiders defense, which is kind of cool. But
Yeah.
could you see him getting more this year? Could you see him having more than 12 and a half sacks?
Yes. So Khalil Mack was traded very late for anyone that remembers. So he really was not in football shape because the whole deal in Oakland was he was sitting out. He was not participating. Obviously, these guys work out, but anyone who's played football, it really doesn't matter the level. There's nothing like game speed, and that could be said at any sport. You just can't simulate game speed. And he played sparingly in the first game, even though he absolutely destroyed the Packers. And I think going into this season, he is fully focused, fully conditioned. Where last year he was had to travel across the country, he's got to relocate, he's got to get into football shape, he's got to learn the defense. He doesn't have to do all that this year, and I truly believe that he's going to push the 20 sack mark and be an absolute monster this season. And I don't think he's going to you know, flame out at the end of the year like he did last year in the playoffs. He's going to be a menace all the way throughout the playoff push.
Yeah, Khalil Mack's one of my favorite players to watch, but keeping it on the side of defense. You guys brought in Mike Davis, Cordell Patterson on the offensive side, but Clinton Dix, and he played college ball with Eddie Jackson. So
Yep.
with the departure of Amos, bringing in, Clinton Dix to play that position, but you guys also lost Fangio, and he was replaced by Chuck Pagano. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about those additions to your team as well?
Yeah, I think as far as the Adrian Amos, Clinton Dix, I know that the majority says that Amos is a better player than Clinton Dix. I think he is, but I don't think it's significant enough for people to notice. I really think it's going to be a wash for Chicago at least. And then in terms of the Fangio leaving for Pagano, it is going to be tough. Fangio is a guy that is just a genius when it comes to defense, but he's very simple. He really doesn't mix up the defense. He knows that he has better players. He lets them do what they're best at, and he just puts the pressure on, which is part of his strengths. That's why he was good in San Francisco as well with Ahmad Brooks and Aldon Smith and that loaded defense, Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis. But with the Bears bringing in Pagano, he was with the Ravens when they had Ed Reed, and he's a little bit more exotic. He's going to blitz guys, overload blitz from one side. He's going to drop Khalil Mack at middle linebacker every once in a while. He's going to bring safety blitzes, which he was famous for with Ed Reed. And I like that. I think this defense is fast, and I think it's talented. And I think he's really going to be able to take advantage of the speed on this defense. And that could help Leonard Floyd get some easier sacks where he doesn't have to just win one-on-ones, where he can work in some twists and stunts.
Yeah, man. So taking it from the defensive side, you got Mitch Trubisky back there. I'm just kind of curious. How you feel about Trubisky and what you think his potential might be. To be honest with you, if I had to bet on one of these teams, I'm easily betting for the Bears to win the division. It's not hard for me just because, we're going to get into the other teams later, but I think the Bears are the most sure thing. But what do you think about Trubisky? And what do you think his potential is? Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. Like, I've been a Trubisky guy when he was at North Carolina. I fell in love with that offense. We mentioned it in the last podcast. If you guys haven't heard it, and check it out. But Ryan Switzer played with Trubisky, and I still love Switzer. They were amazing together. And he's the type of guy where he comes into the league very similar to Jared Goff, and he has a coach in John Fox who is old school defensive coach, run the ball, and we'll throw it if we have to, like Goff had with Fisher. So he leaves, you bring in Nagy, and he's a flipping genius. He is, I don't know why he's not talked about more. Everyone just is all over McVay, who's an amazing coach, but Nagy's right there with him, in my opinion, in terms of offense. And I think Trubisky has more potential than people think. I get very frustrated that Deshaun Watson is just considered to be flat out better than Trubisky. I don't think that. I think he is better at this point, but I really believe that Deshaun Watson and Trubisky have similar ceilings and similar potential. So, I mean, I see Trubisky as a guy who can win a Super Bowl, if not more than one, especially considering how loaded this roster is. He is athletic, man. He can run it. He's got a really good arm, and he knows the offense now. I'm really excited. He's just going to get more aggressive, more confident, and his teammates can't say enough good things about him. I think he's a really good dude.
Yeah, man. One more thing on Trubisky. I didn't watch a whole lot of Bears games last year. What I did see of Trubisky, you could tell he's a younger quarterback, but you could tell that he's also got a lot of potential. But I will say, I mean, his passer rating was 95.4, which was 17th in the league. In the final 7 minutes of the fourth quarter and in overtime, that went up to 115.4, making him the fifth best quarterback with rating in the league. So do you see maybe him being clutch in the future, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for me, this just goes with every quarterback. I don't really like to nail down the clutch factor on a player until a few years. But in terms of Trubisky, he has the tools to be clutch because of his athleticism. He can run around a little bit. The one cool thing about that class in Mahomes, Watson, Trubisky, obviously Mahomes is the best.
Mm-hmm.
I only need one season of that. He's the man. But Deshaun Watson and Trubisky are both very mobile, and they both have the tools, and I think they have the mentality to be clutch. Trubisky wasn't very good in that first half versus the Eagles in the playoff game, but in the second half, he was incredible. And everyone remembers the missed field goal, but Trubisky led that drive to put them in a field goal range where he should have made it. So,
hey man, what was your feeling? What was your feeling with that field goal? I mean, for me, I was like, damn, that sucks. And then when the guy called it a double doink, I was like, okay, that's kind of funny, I guess. But how was your feeling?
When it went through and they called timeout,
Yeah.
I was anticipating a miss,
Yeah.
to be completely honest. He struggled all season. The Eagles, they have some magic to their team.
Right.
And for me, the most important part for their season last year, being the Bears, was being in the playoffs, getting Trubisky's feet wet, and they accomplished that. So, yeah, it's funny when he made it and they iced him. I was honestly anticipating a miss because it just seems like that's the way it works.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Jesse James's catch against the New England Patriots when they didn't call it a catch or whatever, and he fell over the line, and I was like, oh, we won the game, and anyways, I mean, you know what happened, but I remember that feeling. I just was just like, I felt just in the dumps, you know what I mean? I was like, really. But anyways, Bears and the Packers kick off the season for us. First game of the entire NFL season. I think those are the two best teams in the division, so I think it'll be a good game to watch. But man, we'll move on to the Minnesota Vikings. They averaged 22 points a game last year. It was 19th, 345 yards for 20th. So just literally one spot above the Bears in yards per game. Pass yards, they were 13th at 250. Rush yards, 93 a game, almost the bottom of the league. 50 sacks and 0 turnover ratio. How do you feel about the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, the Minnesota Vikings are very talented on defense. They bring back, I believe, all 11 starters. They have an incredible secondary. It's very deep. The big name for me going in this season is Mike Hughes, first-round pick from Central Florida last year. He is a star. He's one of these guys that is going to be these new up-and-coming top shutdown corners, and he's a guy that brings ball production, or at least I anticipate him to. And he's also one of these guys where once he gets that interception, he's looking for a house call, and I love that. So their defense is good. It's solid. The offense is off balance. They've struggled mightily with the offensive line and running back health, which forces Cousins to be a guy that he isn't built to be.
Right.
And that makes me nervous.
So, all right, I got a couple things here about the Vikings. I think they're a good team. They just have. I think they're a very talented team with major issues, if that makes sense. But I'm going to dive into that a little more. So, like, they have a terrible offensive line, absolutely terrible offensive line, especially in a division they have to play against the Bears twice. Um, I mean, they have basically a second string right guard, Brian O'Neill, who's decent, Garrett
Yep.
Bradbury, who's a rookie center, who your center has to be able to read defenses and call them out, communicate amongst the line, and he centers. Oh, I think the offensive line is super underrated in the NFL as it is, and the center is a very underrated position. So they have a
Yeah.
rookie center. Their left guard, Pied Ifen, he was their old center, and he was one of the worst centers in the league last year. And Josh Klein, who they got from the Titans, who was pretty decent. But it's just like,
Yeah, he's
yeah, they literally they don't have an offensive line to actually compete in the playoffs. I think Kirk Cousins is a decent quarterback. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's super good. I think he's average. I think they have a great duo in Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. And I also think Dalvin Cook is like a top 10 running back at worst when healthy, but he can't stay healthy. He's had 3 MCL sprains in the last 2 years, so I just think it's really difficult for them to really be competitive in the postseason when they're missing. I think the offensive line is maybe, I don't know, top 4 or 5 most important things to have to be a competitive football team. They don't have it. Kirk Cousins, he completed at 70% last year. He threw for 4,300 yards, had 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and his QBR was just under 100, which he's fine. But I just don't think. I don't. He needs to be able to. Kirk Cousins, the quarterback, has to sit in the pocket and work it, and he's got a cannon of an arm, and he can make it work. But that's just not what the offensive line is allowing him to do.
definitely.
So I mean, I don't know, man. They need to have an offensive line if they're going to be competitive. So for me, I think the Vikings, if they had an offensive line, would be competitive to win the division, but they don't. So I definitely think they're gonna continue to be 8-8 or whatever.
That's exactly where I have them. I really think that people will be surprised. I think the Lions are gonna push them for sure for
Mm-hmm.
that third spot. I think that you're right, they lack an offensive line, and the thing is, I don't think it has much upside either. I think even if the offensive line works out, they're average,
Mm-hmm.
and that's disappointing because it's pretty rare for any NFL team to go a complete season with no injuries on the offensive line. So that is concerning for
What
sure.
what do you makes them average if the offensive line is healthy?
What makes them average?
Yeah,
Like the
if the offensive line was actually pretty solid, what do you think the weakest point would then be?
of the team.
Yeah.
I think that it's their weapons. I obviously Thielen and Diggs are really really good, and I
Mm-hmm.
like Kyle Rudolph. After that, there is a huge drop off
Right.
with pass catchers. They drafted Irv Smith from Alabama. He's a tight end. Tight ends rarely make a big impact their rookie year. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but it's just very rare. And their third receiver is Laquan Treadwell, maybe. I'm not sure. It's so I think that that's a big question mark for them. Who's going to be that slot receiver? Who's going to be that second tight end? I
Yeah, I
do
mean,
they
there's a
have a
surprising amount of people too that say Rudolph is pretty overrated. That are Viking fans. So I mean, even him, I don't know. They really have Thielen and Diggs, and then Cook. Where if he was healthy, he would be such a beast. But
yes,
he's not going to stay healthy. So that's not even. You know what I mean? It's just not a thing. Um, their defense is solid with Kendricks, Barr, and Griffin, but it doesn't matter when they can't get the ball in the end zone. So,
yeah,
anyways, man. So moving on from them, we got the Detroit Lions, who were going to bully the Vikings, like you said. They were last in the division last year, 6-10, averaged 20 points a game. They were 25th at that. 327 yards a game, which was league ranked 24. Their pass yards, they were 20th, so just one in front of the Bears again at 223 a game, and their rushing was 103 a game for a league rank of 23. 43 sacks and a -5 turnover ratio. I don't think we're gonna find another team that's got as bad as Pittsburgh's turnover ratio. It's really frustrating. But the Lions, I mean, they haven't won their division since 1991. Man, what do you think about this Detroit Lions team?
I there are pieces of this Lions team I really like. I've always been a Stafford guy. I think
I
that
love Galladay.
yeah, he's just I think he's a little underrated. Um, I think when they were just awful. They asked him to throw the ball like 40 times a game, and that's just not a way you win. I like Matt Patricia, but there's rumors that this is a playoff or bust season for Matt Patricia, and I just think that's unrealistic, and I think it's unfair. But I do think that they're going to push the Vikings. I really expect them to split with the Vikings, and if things are clicking, I think that they could beat the Vikings twice and could be a real sneaky team to steal a game from the Packers or even the Bears. I like the Lions. I like their weapons. They got Danny Amendola, who is a good slot receiver. He'll fill in that Golden Tate missing area. Kenny Galladay is a rising star. And I think their offensive line is really, really, really good and underrated. They drafted a center last year, Frank Ragnow. He's a big X factor for me this year. He played okay at guard. They're going to move him back to where he's comfortable at center this year. And he's a bruiser, man. He's a real great run blocker, and they want to be more balanced in the run game with Kerryon Johnson.
Ooh, he's a stud, man.
Yeah, I love him. Low key, one of my sleepers for fantasy. But anyway, I like this team. Patricia knows how to coach a defense. He knows how to scheme a defense. They still have one of the best kickers in the NFL in Prater. And I just think they're sneaky. They won't. I don't think they make the playoffs, but I think they'll be one of those surprising teams at the end of the year that are in that playoff hunt.
Yeah, I think their offensive line is solid. That Kerryon Johnson had a great season. It was a lot of fun to watch him play. Their defense is pretty solid. They lost T.J. Lang and Ziggy Ansah, but I mean they brought in like Danny Amendola, like you said. They also brought in Trey Flowers, and they took my guy Jesse James away from us, and he does not drop balls. So if Stafford's throwing it to Jesse James, he's gonna come down with it. He's a great tight end. You know, he's gonna do work for Detroit. But yeah, the only knock on them I have is like their defense is questionable. They don't have any big playmakers, no big standouts. You know, with the exception of Darius Slay. And they also need a receiver that can create separation because Kenny Galladay is a stud on one side, but they need that receiver that's going to beat the guy. You know, be like a downfield threat, be a speed threat, and take some attention away from Galladay.
Definitely.
But yeah, man, this is one of those teams that could, you know, being in the AFC, take a game away from a big time team. So we'll see. I still think the Bears are on top. I think it's the Packers, and then the Lions or Minnesota. For me, it's kind of a toss up. But that leaves us with just the Packers, man. How do you feel about the Packers?
Well,
they had a big offseason.
If anyone understands the history of the NFL, they would know that being a Bears fan, I hate the Packers because it's one of the greatest rivalries of all time in any sport.
Yeah, anyway, it's great that they're kicking off the season with you guys playing. It's going to be awesome.
For the 100th anniversary, it's perfect fitting.
Right.
I think that they are, unfortunately, going to be good. I cannot stand anyone more than Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a prick, but he is really good and scares the living daylights out of me every time he steps onto the field. They finally decided to spend some money on defense, and they've also done a pretty good job, in my opinion, in the draft. I guess we'll see if that pans out. One of the guys that they just drafted him and just ripped my heart out because I was in love with him, and I think he's going to be a star this year. Jair Alexander, cornerback. He's my big X factor.
Yeah,
he is going to be shut down. I mean, he's got those hips where he just can flip his hips any direction, doesn't slow down. He's got click and close speed. He's got great hands. He is amazing, and it just sucks that he has to play for Green Bay, but he's a big X factor for me. And that pass rush is interesting, to say the least.
Right.
They had some guys really produced last year who most people don't think they can repeat, but if they do, they can be very dangerous because they brought in the Smiths. I don't think there's any relation, but Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith to be those outside rushers.
Yeah, man. They finished third in the division at 6-9-1. They killed it. They were ninth in the league for pass yards at 264, 22nd for rush yards at 104, and had 44 sacks. 0 turnover ratio. But it doesn't matter when you got Aaron Rodgers taking care of the ball. You know what I mean? You would like to see that defense produce a little bit more, just to give you obviously more opportunities. Um, and that's what they went out and they did. They tried to get Adrian Amos, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, polish their offensive line with Billy Turner. But yeah, they got a first year coach in Matt LaFleur. What do you think of him? Do you know much about him? I mean, he was a quarterback coach for Atlanta. He was a quarterback coach for the Rams, and he was an offensive coordinator for a year. And that offense was the 25th ranked offense, as far as I know.
Yeah. So I don't know much about LaFleur, but I do know about the Titans offense last year, being Oregon fan, being a Mariota fan. And to be honest, I was pretty disappointed with his offense, considering that he had a lot of hype, being a Sean McVay guy. So it will be interesting. Obviously, I think Aaron Rodgers is the type of guy where it really doesn't matter. I think he's that good. But it will be interesting to see the run pass balance, which has always been too heavy on the pass.
Yeah, and they've had great. I feel like they've had really good running backs actually, and they still just pass the ball constantly.
Yeah, Aaron Jones is a stud.
He's so good.
I don't know why he doesn't get the ball. It's really weird.
Yeah.
But
it seems like when their running backs go down, like Jamal Williams steps up and has big games, and it's just like, damn, why do they not run the ball more often?
Yeah, they have a good offensive line too.
Yeah, their offensive lines, they've added a ton of depth at their O line, which is 2 years ago, you'd be saying their offensive line's trash. Aaron Rodgers threw for 4,400 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 2 picks. And Devontae Adams is still there. You know what I mean? They lost Randall Cobb, but I think Devontae Adams is really good actually. And Mike Pettin, it's his first year using the defense, was much improved, and now he's acquired some really talented players with people like Zadarius Smith. Shout out Green Bay, taking him out of Baltimore. Appreciate that. Yeah. But Aaron Rodgers looked great until he was injured. I think this Packers team is the real deal. I think it's going to be them and the Bears. I still put my money on the Bears, but I do think Green Bay has a decent shot. As long as Aaron Rodgers is there, this team comes and goes as Aaron Rodgers plays. You know what I mean? It literally all revolves around Aaron Rodgers. He's an amazing talent. One of my friends who's a Packers fan said he played at like 75% to 85% last year, so they suffered from that. But man, when he's healthy, he's just insanely talented. But yeah, man, are you afraid of the Packers the most out of this division?
Definitely. I mean, the Packers, they worry me the most because of Aaron Rodgers. It's the worst feeling in the world to just never feel safe with the lead with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Last year was the first year since I remember where the Bears actually held the lead. They came out and scored on the Packers and had a lead, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, well, Aaron Rodgers is just going to rip my heart out in the second half, so it doesn't matter. And not seeing that was an absolute shock for me. So, yeah, the Packers can be scary. I think one of the big things for them is who's going to step up, who's going to be that second option at receiver. They got some guys that I really like. I'm a big Equanimous St. Brown fan. I think he's got insane ability. They have, how do you say it? Oh, yeah, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's a big, lanky speed threat. And then also Geronimo Allison, who's another one of these.
He had a couple big games last year.
Yeah, and I think that one of those three of those guys is going to be able to step up and be a big part of their offense. I think that they all have a lot of talent. Yeah,
they're in a good position too. All they got to do is create an opening, and Rodgers will find them and deliver the ball. You just got to catch it, So they're in a great position to become like household names from no names. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So just coming back real quick, the last thing I want to talk about the Packers, unless you have anything else you want to talk about, but Aaron Jones. He led the league in the last 2 years for yards per carry, and he's almost at 1,000 yards on 200 carries. If he stays healthy, I think he's such a difference maker, and I really hope the Packers utilize that run game more because, like you said, the offensive line is pretty good. It's gotten much better, and their run game is way good, and they're just not utilizing it. So hopefully, if the Packers want to win the division, I think they really got to work with their run game a little more.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting stat, but the Packers' goal should be that Aaron Jones does not lead the league in average yards per carry, because that means they're not giving him the ball enough.
Yeah.
Give him the ball and let him really carry this offense, because that defense needs rest. You know, you got to give your defense rest, and that way they can really take advantage of play action, where Aaron Rodgers, one of the most underrated parts about his game is the actual play action fake. He's one of the best guys in the NFL to fake that handoff, and he can throw the thing a country mile. So I think that'll be huge for their team.
Yeah, man. Anything else you want to say about the NFC North? You got your Bears winning it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the way. I think it's gonna be neck and neck with the Bears and Packers, but I think that as long as the defense stays healthy and Trubisky stays healthy, I think the Bears just have more talent all around.
Yeah, man. So, hey, appreciate everybody watching this. Our social medias, once again, are under Nick. For those of you listening and not watching, it's at the Waiver Wire on Facebook and at Waiver Wire Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Nick, I appreciate you coming on. I kind of want to talk about the AFC West next. When you brought up Patrick Mahomes earlier, it kind of piqued my interest.
All right.
I read a power rankings that had the Chargers number 2, so I was like, ooh, all right, we got to dive into this.
Yeah, okay.
But, all right, man, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Can't wait for the next one.